Ontario Premier Doug Ford has given a strong vote of confidence to Prime Minister Mark Carney after the new leader's first official meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, a moment many observers saw as an early test of Carney's leadership on the international stage. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Ford, speaking from Queen's Park on Tuesday afternoon, painted the Oval Office meeting as an encouraging start. In his view, Carney managed to strike the right balance, firm enough to hold Canada's position, yet diplomatic enough to win over a famously mercurial American president. It was very productive. He held his own, Ford said with emphasis. You could see that Trump respects him, and it's very obvious that Trump likes Carney a lot more than he ever liked Justin Trudeau. The remark was striking, not only for its bluntness but also for the broader implications. Canada's relationship with the United States has long hinged on more than just policy. It has often depended on the personal rapport between leaders. In past decades, figures such as Brian Mulroney and Ronald Reagan forged close bonds that led to landmark trade agreements. Conversely, tensions between Trudeau and Trump frequently spilled into public view, with barbed comments, awkward summits, and trade disputes dominating headlines. Ford seemed to suggest that Carney, with his technocratic style and calm demeanor, might be able to reset that relationship on more stable ground. When Carney stepped into the White House, he was greeted with a level of warmth that seemed deliberate on Trump's part. Cameras captured the president calling Carney a very talented, very good person, while also acknowledging that their talks would cover some tough points. For his part, Carney was quick to respond with a blend of courtesy and strategic flattery. Referring to Trump as a transformational president, the Canadian leader signaled his willingness to find common ground, even as the two countries remain at odds on trade and energy policy. To veteran observers of international diplomacy, the exchange looked like a textbook example of two leaders trying to establish trust without immediately wading into confrontation. Ford later underscored that point. You sure can't go the other way. It's not going to work out too well for you, he said, alluding to the dangers of crossing Trump too aggressively in a first encounter. The premier's message was clear. Carney had struck the right note by showing respect while still holding firm on Canada's interests. Trump's familiar rhetoric. Yet even amid the diplomatic niceties, Trump could not resist slipping back into some of his trademark rhetoric about Canada's economy. At one point, he mused about dismantling the Canadian auto sector, a pillar of Ontario's economy and a symbol of cross-border supply chain integration. He also declared that the U.S. doesn't need anything from Canada, brushing aside the interdependence that economists and business leaders on both sides of the border know to be undeniable. Carney pushed back firmly, reminding Trump that Canada was not for sale. The Prime Minister made it clear that while Canada values its partnership with the United States, it would not be bullied or reduced to a bargaining chip in Trump's domestic political games. Ford quickly came to Carney's defense, offering a pointed reminder of Canada's strategic importance to America's prosperity and security. I guess Trump doesn't want the potash that keeps his farmers going, or the uranium to keep his nuclear energy facilities going, or high-grade nickel that keeps the military and aerospace and manufacturing going, Ford said. He listed the resources one by one, as though building a case in a courtroom, emphasizing that American industries rely heavily on Canadian exports. He also mentioned electricity exports that power U.S. homes and businesses, another often overlooked aspect of the bilateral relationship. Ford's strategic framing. For Ford, the meeting was more than just a photo opportunity. It was, in his view, a litmus test of Carney's ability to manage the complex, often turbulent relationship between Ottawa and Washington. The premier said he was reassured. It was a warm greeting and I'm very confident that it's a good start to a long relationship. He also made reference to Trump's domestic standing, pointing out the president's polling numbers. Ford had brought up Trump's popularity before, including in comments he made at Queen's Park on Monday. His repeated focus on the issue suggests he sees Trump's political vulnerabilities as a key factor in Canada's strategy. A president worried about re-election, Ford implied, may be more inclined to strike deals that can be presented as victories to his voter base, something Canadian leaders must keep in mind when negotiating. A new chapter in Canada-US relations. The Carney-Trump meeting comes at a critical juncture. The Canada-US relationship has endured trade disputes, energy battles, and tensions over NATO spending. Yet it also remains one of the closest economic partnerships in the world, with billions of dollars in goods and services crossing the border each day. Carney, a former central banker with international experience, is seen by many as someone uniquely equipped to manage those complexities. His calm, numbers-driven approach contrasts with Trump's brash, personality-driven style, but Tuesday's meeting suggested that the two might actually find a working rhythm. For Ford, who has often presented himself as a pragmatist, the day's events were cause for cautious optimism. Carney's going to give it everything he can, the premier said, signaling his belief that the new prime minister has both the determination and the skill to advance Canada's interests in Washington. For all the warmth and handshakes that marked Mark Carney's debut in the Oval Office, there was no escaping the shadow of history. The Canada-US relationship has always been shaped by personalities as much as policies, and the ghost of Justin Trudeau still lingered over Tuesday's encounter. Donald Trump never made a secret of his distaste for Trudeau. During his presidency, their meetings were often tense, sometimes even hostile. At one infamous G7 summit, Trump left abruptly, denouncing Trudeau as dishonest and weak, after the Canadian leader dared to push back on U.S. tariffs. The personal animosity filtered down into policy, sparking trade wars that bruised industries on both sides of the border. Even ordinary Canadians came to feel the strain, as headlines painted their prime minister as a frequent target of Trump's public scorn. Against this backdrop, Carney's Oval Office debut carried enormous symbolic weight. If Trump saw Trudeau as an irritant, he seemed to view Carney as a clean slate, an unknown quantity, someone with whom he could potentially reset relations. That sense of renewal was visible in Trump's unusually warm body language, his broad smile, and his effusive compliments. A very talented, very good person, he repeated, as though trying to signal a break from past tensions. Carney, too, understood the importance of the moment. He had spent years in the halls of global finance, navigating crises at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. Diplomacy, calculation, and the careful weighing of words were second nature to him. But now, he faced a different kind of test: how to manage a president who thrives on unpredictability, who turns every meeting into a performance, and who often blurs the line between negotiation and theater. The Canadian press dissected every gesture, every glance. Analysts noted the careful way Carney flattered Trump by calling him transformational, while still planting a flag of Canadian independence by insisting that Canada is not for sale. It was, in their view, a masterclass in balancing firmness with diplomacy, a stark contrast to Trudeau's often more idealistic approach, which clashed with Trump's transactional instincts. Yet beneath the surface, unease remained. Trump's casual dismissal of Canada's auto industry, an economic backbone not only for Ontario but for much of the Midwest supply chain, was a reminder that goodwill alone could not shield Canada from his hardball tactics. And when Trump boasted that the U.S. didn't need anything from its northern neighbor, seasoned observers knew it was more than bravado. It was a signal that the president might again use threats and exaggerations as bargaining tools. Doug Ford, speaking bluntly as ever, pushed back on Trump's claim, listing Canada's essential exports one by one: potash for American farmers, uranium for nuclear plants, nickel for the military and aerospace sectors, electricity to power millions of homes. His comments struck a chord not only in Ontario but across Canada, where many felt that the country's role as a reliable supplier was too often taken for granted by Washington. But even Ford's pointed rebuttal carried a note of pragmatism. He knew Trump respected strength, and he knew Canadians would rally behind a leader who stood up for their interests. The premier's calculated tone suggested he saw an opportunity. Carney's relationship with Trump could become the bridge that Canada had been missing for years. Still, the challenge was clear. Personal rapport might smooth the way, but the structural disputes, tariffs, energy pipelines, Buy American policies, remained unresolved. And as Trump eyed re-election, every international engagement became another stage for his domestic performance. For Carney, this was only the beginning. The Oval Office handshake had opened a door, but the path ahead promised turbulence. Behind the smiles and compliments, Canada's future dealings with Trump would demand not only diplomacy but resilience, strategy, and perhaps